deputy chairman of Russian Security Council stated that Russia seeks total victory, not compromise, in peace talks with Ukraine. And the recent negotiations in Istanbul yielded little progress, with Russia demanding significant territorial concessions and military limitations from Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine reported a deadly rocket attack in Sumy, resulting in civilian casualties, and claimed responsibility for damaging a key bridge in Russia. The prospect of peaceful resolution remains bleak as hostilities escalate. And when I look at this, the only thing I see is a constant conflict and battle and war, how Russia invaded Ukraine, but nobody knows why. Nobody knows why this ongoing conflict, this ongoing war continues. What is the justification? What is the reason behind Putin's action and invading and trying to take over Ukraine? Let's talk about it. Because when we talk about the deep roots between Russia and Ukraine, even before the Soviet Union, Ukraine and Russia are like estranged siblings with a shared childhood. They have very bitter memories and blood-soaked disputes over the family estate. And as I told you this before, I spoke with a Ukrainian man on my cycling ride last Saturday, and he told me they're basically one of the same people. They all are descendants of the Slavic people. Now, the modern Russia, Ukrainian, and Belarusian identities are traced their roots to Kievan Rus, a federation of Slavic tribes centered in what is now Kiev, not Moscow. In fact, Kiev was the original capital of Slavic orthodoxy and civilization long before Moscow was anything more than a village surrounded by mud and trees, because Ukraine as a country is older than Russia. Now, we talk about the Mongol invasion and the rise of Moscow between the 13th and 15th century. The Mongol Golden Horde raised Kiev in the 13th century. Now, as Kiev declined, Moscow rose in the northeast under Mongol favorite and gradually consolidated power, eventually claiming to be the third Rome after it fell. Now, Ukraine, meanwhile, what occurred there, they got tangled up with Poland, Lithuania, Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Now, here's the bombshell most people don't know, because Ukraine was very instrumental in forming the Soviet Union. That's one key component that a lot of people are really not speaking about, how Ukraine was a very, almost spearheaded the forming of the Soviet Union, and this was all behind power. This was about power, ladies and gentlemen. Where do we go from here? Because the Russian Empire collapsed in 1917, and then Ukraine briefly declares independence between 1970 and 1920, but it crushed in a very chaotic civil war involving all sorts of different groups, nationalists, anarchists, and foreign powers. In 1922, Ukraine became a founding member of the USSR. We're talking about the Soviet Union. They became a founding member alongside Russia, Belarus, okay, and different federations from Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, all these different countries. But Ukraine didn't join willingly. It was coerced, bloodied, and betrayed. Now, if we look at the time period between 1932 and 1933, and we reference the Holodomor, Stalin's forced collectivization's policies resulted in the Holodomor, a man-made famine that killed 4 million Ukrainians. Now, for you guys who are not familiar with the term I'm stating here, it's Holodomor, Holodomor. Now, many Ukrainians see it as a genocide, a calculated extermination of national identity. Now, Soviet leadership, largely based in Moscow, suppressed Ukrainian language, their culture, and the independence movement. Now, if we fast forward to World War II, Ukraine is caught between Hitler and Stalin, invaded by Nazis, then retaken by the Soviets. They had some resistant movements, Ukrainian insurgent army. They were fighting both sides. They were fighting the Nazis and they were fighting the Soviets. So from that point on, you had deep divisions that grew. Some Ukrainians fought with the Nazis. Listen to this. Some Ukrainians fought with the Nazis to escape Stalin, a fact Russia still weaponized in propaganda today. Because do not forget, one of the premises, one of the base that President Putin was referring to, one of the reasons why he stated they even invaded Ukraine, not to take over some land that was stolen from them like Crimea, which was always Russian land, and Crimea, by the way, is an island, that they were trying to eradicate white supremacy from Ukraine, that Ukraine is a white supremacy country. That is what President Putin said. Now, we don't know how true that is because people also state there is a skin hair culture in Russia as well. Now, Ukraine became a key military industrial center of the USSR. We're talking about missiles, nukes, and tanks. Then if you look at Chernobyl of 1986, the worst nuclear disaster in history occurs in northern Ukraine. Now, by 1991, when the USSR collapsed, Ukraine held the third largest nuclear arsenal on earth. Think about that. You had America, Russia, and Ukraine. And Ukraine held the third largest nuclear arsenal on earth. Now, we're referencing post-Soviet and the breakaway and the betrayal. We look towards 1991 of independence because Ukraine votes overwhelmingly 90% for independence, including Crimea. Russia loses imperial prize and they never really got over it. Russia never really got over losing Crimea because it was always saying that Crimea was part of their land, that Crimea was their country, and that was not of their own. And if you look at the Budapest Memorandum that occurred in 1994, Ukraine gave up its nukes in exchange for security guarantees from Russia, the US, and the UK. To who? Again, Ukraine gave up their nukes for security guarantees from Russia, from the US, from the UK. Russians signed and promised to respect Ukrainian borders. Russia signed and promised to respect Ukrainian borders. Now, did they do that? Absolutely not, because that didn't age well, did it not? Now, Ukraine wants West, but Russia wants control. Now, the Ukrainian people, especially in the West, push towards Europe, democracy, and NATO. But Russia seeks this as betrayal, a Western-backed coup on its doorstep. So how do you think Russia's going to take that? Now, in 2014, when we look at Crimea and the Donbass, after Ukraine's pro-Russian presidency is ousted during the Euromaidan protest, Russia invades and annexed Crimea. And then you have a lot of the Russian-backed separatists wage war in eastern Ukraine. Over 14,000 people died before 2022. So this has been full scale for a very long time, but it has not hit worldwide mass media. But now it's on full stage. Now, if we look back to 2022 or February 24th of 2022, Russia launched a full invasion on Ukraine. And President Putin claims Ukraine is run by Nazis. A Western puppet state imposes a threat to Russian security. Now, the real reason, supposedly, the fear of democracy next door, a free Western-aligned Ukraine, would unravel Putin's imperial ambitions and embolden his own oppositions. And then the questions I know that you all ask, that I ask each and every day, if Putin is trying to eradicate the Nazi regime, supposedly, allegedly, that is running Ukraine, because one of the reasons and the premise that he even invaded Ukraine, then why is America supporting Ukraine? Why is America in the middle of this? I know America doesn't want another Hitler redrawing borders by force. Because we'll look at it, when you essentially attack Russia as a country like ours, do not forget the relation that Russia has to China, Iran, India, North Korea. And when you look at it, even though it was kind of tossed around, Ukraine isn't a NATO member, but some people may look at Ukraine as a NATO buffer. Now, if Russia rolls through Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics supposedly are next. Is Russia slowly trying to reform the Soviet Union? And I've heard critics all across media stating, is this democracy or autocracy? Because Ukraine is a test case in the global clash between open societies and authoritarian states. And then let's be honest, Ukraine is a live fire testing ground for U.S. weapon systems. And aid is not a free gift because it boasts and it boosts American defense contracts, global influence, and armed diplomacy. So the only question that I have, can America walk away? Can America walk away from Ukraine? What if America pulls out? Well, most likely Ukraine falls. Russia likely wins or carves out a very large chunk of Ukrainian territory. And million more of Ukrainians can be displaced and be refugees of America and the UK. Does that in any form or fashion involves NATO? Because that may fracture NATO. I mean, because Europe is going to panic. Countries like Poland, Estonia, Lithuania, they're going to demand U.S. bases and nukes to protect them or to support them. And if by any chance, if NATO shows any weakness, President Putin is going to see that as a crack in their security, and he's going to smell weakness from a long way away. And if I look at the world stage, if America really stepped out of all these different conflicts and these very political complex situations, what about China and Taiwan? China is stating that Taiwan is actually part of China. And Taiwan is stating that we are an independent country. We do not belong to China. Even though they share some of the same languages. So if America moves out all of these different worldwide conflicts, China would then move on Taiwan. If America won't back Ukraine, will it defend Taiwan? I don't believe so. Because when you look at China, Iran, and North Korea, they will get the green light to go rogue. Remember, Ukraine gave up nukes in exchange for U.S. protection. So this is one of the reasons why the U.S. is involved in the Ukraine and Russian war. Because if the U.S. walks away, other nations may seek nukes as insurance. Because don't forget that partnership and that treaty that was signed. Ukraine, if you give up your nukes, we will protect you from Russia. UK stated we'll protect you from Russia. And then even Russia stated that we won't invade. But all this has faltered. All this has not become true. So can America walk away? Will we break our promise to Ukraine? Are the American people now privy of the information and historical background, the reason why we're supporting Ukraine? This is why when people tell you it's about the here and now, it's about present day, and it's not about history, the only way for you to understand the present is for you to know the history. We can talk on the surface about Ukraine and Russia all day, but if you don't know how things occurred, if you don't know how things started, if you don't know why America's involved, this is the reason why. The only question is, how long are we going to protect Ukraine? How long are we going to support Ukraine? I wish I could see that treaty that was signed now. I wish I could see that promissory note that was signed by the UK and America as well. Was there an end date? Was there a dollar amount? Was there an expiration date of how long we'll support? So again, I ask myself, should America stay or walk away? Because let me tell you something. If America stays involved, roughly three things that I can come up with very quickly here. We're going to have endless spending in the support of Ukraine's security. Endless spending of their security. We're going to have political polarization, and then the risk of escalation with a nuclear superpower like Russia. An escalation could lead to small conflicts and battles that may lead to even full-fledged war. But what if we walk away? What if America walks away from the Ukrainian-Russia conflict? Well, I can tell you quite frankly that Russia will win. Global democracy will take a hit, as the Western media would say. And most importantly, the U.S. credibility will be burned because our words will never hold up in international court again. But neither choice is clean. When you're talking about geopolitics, it isn't really about perfection. It's about, unfortunately, the lesser of evils and playing the long game. Ukraine may be a very small nation, but it's the ground zero of the 21st century of ideological war. So again, do I know the right choice for America to step out of this war? On the surface, it's very easy. We should just pull out, let them handle their own business. They're a European country. And some people even state that America is a European country. No, it was colonized by the Europeans, but it's not a European country. It's America. We're in a whole different continent. These are the Americas: North America, Central America, South America. Yeah, you had European colonizers, murderers, killers, rioters, looters to take over this land by force. But this is America.